Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello and welcome to episode 188 of the Criminologist podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. This week, I want to dedicate our time to note and commemorate the release of the 7th edition of The Psychology of Criminal Conduct by Bonta and Andrews. I am honored to have some of my work included in this latest iteration. So I want to talk about that a little bit later, but also remind you all of just what an amazing piece of work this text really is. Now, for context, for any of you who are currently operating under the risk, need, responsivity framework, which I would contend would be the vast amount of correctional practitioners around the world, you owe so much to Jim Bonta and the late Don Andrews. Their three overarching principles of risk, need, and responsivity really do factor into, or at least they should factor into, the interactions that you have with your clients on a daily basis. And what is truly amazing about the 7th edition of the Psychology of Criminal Conduct is that it continues to evolve and grow with the knowledge base. Recall, the first edition of the Psychology of Criminal Conduct was published way back in 1994. To be clear, there were a slew of studies and research articles published as to risk, need, and responsivity prior to this, but I want to focus on the textbook itself. Now, for perspective, in 1994, we were all flocking to theaters to watch The Lion King, and Seinfeld was dominating primetime on the television landscape. We had the Winter Olympics in Lillehammer, Norway, and Brazil won the World Cup by defeating Italy that year. But again, this was not a one and done effort by Bonta and Andrews. This text has continued to evolve with the science and continues to build on those original, foundational, theoretical concepts. Let's reflect on some other theories or some of the other conventional wisdom of the time back in 1994, just to see how we've evolved in some of these other arenas. Let's look at the conventional wisdom around nutrition back then. In 1994, we were all big into the fat-free craze. Fat in diets back then was widely seen as the main cause of obesity and heart disease, and it led to a surge in fat-free and low-fat products. The research has since shown that not all fats are bad. In fact, healthy fats, like those from avocados, nuts, fish, are essential for good health. And the focus has shifted more towards the dangers of trans fats and the importance of a balanced diet. We could turn to the world of astronomy and remember the Pluto debate back then. Back in 1994, Pluto was universally recognized as the 9th planet in our solar system. But in 2006, the International Astronomical Union redefined the criteria for planethood, which led to the reclassification of Pluto as a, quote, dwarf planet. We could even come closer to home here and take a look at the world of psychology and the whole nature versus nurture debate. The 1994 perspective was that there was a more pronounced dichotomy between nature, or the genetics, and nurture, or one's environment, in determining human behavior. Today, it's more widely accepted that behavior is the result of complex interactions between genes and the environment, with the concept of epigenetics gaining prominence in explaining these interactions. And just as our understanding has grown with those previous illustrations, our understanding has grown as to psychology and criminology, and those advancements are indeed reflected in the 7th edition. Understanding criminal conduct is like piecing together a complex puzzle. Each piece represents factors like individual psychology, social influences, and environmental conditions. This book serves as a navigational chart guiding professionals through the intricate waters of criminal psychology. And just as medicine has moved and advanced from folk remedies to modern healthcare, our understanding of criminal behavior has transformed from what was initially presented in the 1994 iteration to a sophistication of those original theories. Or, as I would contend, at least a broader understanding of one's criminal trajectory. Let's examine just a couple of instances of this broadened understanding. For example, the 7th edition gives massive due diligence, for lack of a better term, to the topics of both trauma and desistance from crime. Two topics, I would contend, which were not as present or present at all in the case of desistance back in the 1994 first edition. Let's talk about trauma for a little bit. I know a lot of individuals, particularly with the advent of ACEs, those adverse childhood experiences, sometimes get confused as to the issue of where trauma belongs in the galaxy of the risk, need, responsivity framework. And I'm just going to read straight from the 7th edition here, where an excellent job is done of framing those ACEs, those adverse childhood experiences. Now, for the uninitiated, there are 10 ACEs, or 10 adverse childhood experiences, which are broken down into 3 categories. Those 3 categories are abuse, including physical, sexual, and emotional abuse; neglect, including both emotional and physical neglect; and household dysfunction. And this is made up of factors such as caregiver substance misuse, mental illness, intimate partner violence, and parental separation. The text does a good job of reminding the reader that all of these ACEs are unchangeable. That is to say, they can never be reduced. So they do a good job in the text of pointing out that the practitioner could almost think of ACEs along the lines of criminal history. Very predictive in predicting criminal outcomes, but they're not dynamic. They're not changeable. Therefore, are categorized as a responsivity consideration. How can the practitioner weave in that knowledge around ACEs in developing case plans and other interventions to address those changeable, dynamic risk factors? Indeed, in Chapter 11, the authors speak of specific responsivity and trauma-informed treatment. And they note, again reading directly from the text, ACEs are a predictor of adult criminality. In general personality and cognitive social learning theory, however, an ACE is not considered a criminogenic need that should be directly targeted in treatment. And I should note that the word directly has been italicized for emphasis. The text goes on to say, an ACE does not meet the basic definition of a criminogenic need as a dynamic risk factor. It may predict, as does criminal history, but once an individual has experienced an adverse childhood experience, it cannot be reversed. Criminogenic needs are dynamic and can change in two directions. For example, with the criminogenic need of substance misuse, one can develop a problem and one can overcome the addiction. Yet when providing treatment, ACEs cannot be ignored. Rather, ACEs are considered a specific responsivity factor because the personal, emotional effects of ACEs are obstacles to successful treatment. I don't know how many times I've said, as a level of service case management inventory, aka LSCMI or LSIR trainer, that probation officers, parole officers should think of responsivity considerations as obstacles to target directly those criminogenic variables, which can indeed be changed. Now, as noted, the authors over the years have not only considered the new research, but in fact listened to some of their critics and some of the challenges to their general personality and cognitive social learning theory. Chapter 15, the last chapter of the text, talks about these challenges to GPCSL. Among other things, they talk about the Good Lives model. I know that my Australian listeners are very familiar with the work of Tony Ward and the Good Lives model. And I'm also happy to report that they dedicate pages to the topic of desistance from crime. They note the work of Sampson and Loeb, and of course the work of Shad Maruna and his Liverpool desistance study, and also consider some of the findings of Fergus McNeil. What I am most excited about, however, is that at the conclusion of every chapter, readers are directed to check out more resources by going to the website psychologycriminalconduct.routledge.com. If you go to that website and you navigate to the Student Resource tab, you will see a drop-down chevron which illustrates all of the chapters of the text. And if you click on chapter 15, which as noted talks, among other things, about the topic of desistance from crime, you will see some additional resources. So proud to announce that among the audio and video resources included in the 7th edition of the Psychology of Criminal Conduct are the Criminologist interview with Shad Maruna. Specifically, you will find a link to episode 45 with my interview with Shad, where we talked all about the topic of desistance from crime. Within that link, you will also find a YouTube video that I produced, which serves as Desistance 101 for individuals who may not be as versed in that topic. Happy to report that our trauma-informed desistance model, known as TIDES, bundles all of this knowledge quite eloquently, and happy to report that we are gaining traction with that movement. But getting back to the roots of the psychology of criminal conduct and its emphasis on those changeable or dynamic risk factors, also known as criminogenic needs, I want to share with you all the latest production here from the Criminologist Home Studios, another song parody, if you will, building on the wild success of our first parody we did, the commercial for CriminoGuard, our fictitious product to attack those pesky risk factors, which I guess I could also play at the end of this episode. Let me first, though, share with you all something which I enjoyed putting together. I hope you all enjoy it as well. And if you are a trainer or a practitioner, I hope you find some value in this. Please, here we are with the world premiere of our yet-to-be-titled song parody, talking all about criminogenic need. People often ask, hey, what drives crime? And they seem to get it wrong most every time. It's not because they're evil or just bad actors. Nope, it's about criminogenic factors. Criminogenic, it means crime generator. Now let's take a ride on the knowledge elevator. Criminogenic, it means crime generator. We'll start at the bottom with the lowest correlation. The more we advance, start thinking causation. No hobbies in your life? Lots of free time? Not a huge indicator, but it could lead to crime. With work or school, did you get very far? If you loved them both, give yourself a gold star. Marriage and family, are they riddled with strife? Are those indicators? You bet your life. Alcohol and drugs, misuse and abuse. There's a link to crime if you really let loose. Criminogenic, it means crime generator. Rely on the science, don't be a spectator. Criminogenic, it means crime generator. We're getting closer to the leading indicator. A delinquent background, even though it's in the past, it's fairly predictive once the die's been cast. A stronger correlation, let's give peers a turn. Think model behavior, that's how we learn. Just two more left, and they're both about thinking. Positive or negative, which Kool-Aid you drinking? Personality pattern, your orientation are the biggest drivers of crime causation. Criminogenic, it's what drives crime. If you ever forget, just use this rhyme. Had a lot of fun putting that together. I noted that this is the untitled version of this song. Literally just produced this over the weekend. If you enjoyed this and or you find perhaps some training value in this, or entertainment value at least, drop us a line here at the Criminologist Podcast at gmail.com for suggested song titles, or maybe we could create a vote here. I'm thinking along the lines of the Criminogenic Beat, or maybe Criminal Conduct Unplugged, or maybe The Sound of Criminogenic, a crime theory tune. Use your imaginations. Let me know. I mentioned the other parody that we did a while back on the program. That was a fun little commercial parody advertising our fictitious product of Criminogard. I would note that Dr. Bonta did contact the show after I had originally dropped this and said he really appreciated the humor and ingenuity that I put into this. So, Dr. Bonta, if you are listening, I hoped you enjoyed our criminogenic beat there as well. But with no further ado, here we go with Criminogard. Tired of those pesky risk factors? Fed up with those nagging periods of reoffending? Just can't seem to keep on the straight and narrow? Then try Criminogard. Criminogard is our patented repellent against criminogenic need. Criminogard is effective against the risk factors of delinquent past, dysfunctional family relationships, substance misuse, lack of pro-social leisure activities, deficits around education and employment, negative peers, pro-criminal attitude, and a history of antisocial personality pattern. Simply apply Criminogard at the onset of delinquent behavior or when actuarial risk assessment warrants application. Criminogard works by attacking criminogenic need at the source while buffering against future risk. Inspired by general personality and cognitive social learning theory, Criminogard identifies criminogenic need at its source. Then our top secret byproducts mimic pro-social modeling to elicit the onset of pro-social behavior. Once the cost for antisocial behavior outweighs the rewards, users begin seeing reductions in criminal deeds. Criminogard is available in regular, mint, or jasmine scent. Find Criminogard at all quality vendors, shops, and strip malls. Criminogard is not a substitute for proven evidence-based practices. Criminogard may cause mild discomfort or skin rash. In case of continued maladaptive behavior, users should subject themselves to proven core correctional practices. Criminogard has failed to result in significant effect sizes in recidivism reduction. Buyer beware, not sold in Canada. And that concludes this abbreviated version of the Criminologist podcast. I need to get busy here in the studios working on the YouTube standalone version of the song parody that I shared with you all today. But we will be back next week with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, the Paragon Group, LLC.com, for training or presentations as to core correctional skills, the topic of desistance from crime, or of course, our innovative and groundbreaking TIDES model, our trauma-informed desistance model. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, or indeed a clever name from the song parody we released today, feel free to contact the show via our email at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New, fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist Media Group is also on X, formerly known as Twitter. Give us a follow at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. You may also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Hey, lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this podcast. And if you believe in what we're doing on the show, if you're part of the movement, please spread the word. Tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast. And of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us. Criminogenic means crime generator. Now let's take a ride on the knowledge elevator. Criminogenic means crime generator.
The Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.